So I'm Zach Lipovsky, and I'm the director of Leprechaun Origins.
So how did you approach this? What was your kind of, I want to make this unique because there's a billion slasher movies out there.
Yeah.
You said,
Well, the really cool thing that excited me about it was initially the idea of rebooting Leprechaun. A lot of people, the past franchise was kind of tongue-in-cheek and kind of a comedy, horror comedy. And so the challenge for this one, set from the very beginning, is there a way of doing something here that's legitimately a horror film, an R-rated, scary, grounded, kind of Guillermo del Toro style horror film, rather than something that's more tongue-in-cheek, because that, I think, was done very well by the previous franchise, and this one was, is there a way of updating it for today? Something that isn't kind of a little guy in a suit and kind of, something that's actually going to terrify you and disgust you and horrify you. And so that challenge was kind of what excited me by it. And then all the decisions kind of came from there.
what was your reason for using the sisters?
The sisters weren't involved in Leprechaun. They were in doing See No Evil.
I got confused.
But they're characters in and of themselves. It's been really cool with them because we're all from Vancouver, where both of our films were shot. So we both came up through the indie scene in Vancouver. This is my 5th Comic-Con. The other 4 times were as a fan. So, and they've been to many Comic-Cons as fans too. So it's been really cool to kind of come up through those ranks together and also make these films together and be here together.
Yeah. So we know Hornswoggle kind of more as more of a comedy guy and more of a fun guy, so you've taken him and made him a little different. Can you talk about working with him and going through that process?
Well, the really cool thing about Hornswoggle is he started his career as a nonverbal entertainer, and so he really knows how to communicate with his eyes and with his body language and all that kind of stuff. And in this take of Leprechaun, it is much more of a creature, a kind of nonverbal creature that's kind of crawled out of the depths of Ireland. And so all his talents, even though he's under 3 hours of makeup and really transformed into this kind of disgusting creature, his talents as a performer really came through. And not only that, but his ability to have endurance. I mean, he's an incredible athlete, and also will never complain. Like, he's worked so hard to get to where he is. So often we had to look out for him because he's like ready to do anything, ready to do any stunt, ready to work for as long as it takes because he wants it to be as good as it is. And a lot of that, I think, comes from the endurance that those superstars have to get to where they are.
What about the violence of the film? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, the violence for the film was all approached from a perspective of what can we do that is unique to this creature? What can we do that no one's ever done before that you could only do in this movie? And so a lot of that is don't want to spoil it, but a lot of that has to do with how gold is used in the film, as well as what the Leprechaun's trying to get from other people, and some pretty creative use of. I mean, that's kind of what I think people like from these films is the film isn't necessarily overly gory. It's not a torture porn movie. It is much more in the style of Jaws that slowly reveals, some deaths early on. You don't necessarily see the explicitness of them. You see elements enough to kind of build the suspense as you go through, so that by the time there are some of the more iconic, really graphic elements that make it an R-rated film, you're more heavily invested in those rather than having been desensitized by seeing 20 people tortured before the 10-minute mark or something. So it's a bit more paced out than other films, and it's also a bit more specific to what a leprechaun would do.
Did you go into the mythology of the whole leprechaun a little bit?
Yeah, the cool thing was looking at Leprechaun Origins, so it was looking at what is the origin of this myth. Like, today, a leprechaun is something that's it's on cereal boxes, and everyone, kind of has a pretty light kind of perspective on it. And so, but maybe 3,000 years ago, the Celtics met something in a deep, dark cave that was actually pretty scary. And from there, elements of stories they told became the silly kind of thing we have today. And so we really were looking for something that had kind of a biological origin to it, that could be something legitimate, that could terrify you, but still have the elements enough that you can recognize it as a leprechaun, without giving away 3 magical wishes, but still being true to something, but reinventing it in a new way.
Were you a fan of the original ones at all? like as a kid or anything? Did you like them or?
I wasn't that familiar with the original franchise, which is I think one of the reasons that I was able to come at it with a really kind of fresh perspective. I then quickly, watched all of them and got into them as much as I could, and there's a lot of nods to the original franchise in kind of ways that fans would notice, but not necessarily story elements, like iconic props in the background and character names and that kind of stuff. Like there's a tricycle in the back of the scene and stuff like that, and trying to be true to the roots, but still take a really fresh perspective on where we're going.
So certainly there's other people in the film. We've talked about Hornswoggle.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the rest of your cast and working with them?
Yeah, so one of the really cool things is I grew up in Vancouver, and there's a lot of amazing actors in Vancouver, but often they're kind of playing secondary roles to a lot of the American stars that come in, and it was so cool to be able to bring in so many of the awesome actors that I've grown up with and that I know and put them into this film and give them leading roles. And there's some really really awesome parts, especially Gary Chalk, who's a really famous actor in Canada, who's one of the Optimus Prime voices, and Conan, and he gets to play just this awesome Irish character that really is kind of a great kind of human antagonist in the film. And then and all the kids in the film are really, really good too, and I was able to kind of give them their kind of first breakout role, which was really fun, and they were all willing to basically do anything they could to make this something that's hopefully going to really impress people. As to, I'm kind of hoping people tune in and they're expecting something kind of tongue-in-cheek and then are slowly horrified as they realize what they've put in.
What about location? How did you pick the location?
Yeah, so we shot, the film takes place in Ireland, and so we found areas in Vancouver. Vancouver has kind of a farming area nearby that has rolling fields and that kind of stuff, and we brought in, most of the movie takes place at night, so tons of atmosphere and smoke and giving it that kind of ancient feeling, as well as bringing in rock walls and all those elements that are iconic to Ireland, and with a little fiddle music in the background and stuff. I think we sell it pretty well.
Are you hoping that this turns into a franchise, a new Leprechaun franchise?
I think the idea is definitely this is an origin story. It's definitely the first film in the beginning of a new series of films. Not many of the people survive to the end of the movie, but there's definitely room for this. Kind of gets the cat out of the bag to reveal the creature and kind of get it on its beginning, setting up where it came from. And like other origin stories, I think now there's the opportunity to see where that could go from here, if it connects with audiences and it makes sense that there's more story there to explore. There's no laid out plans exactly of what those stories will be, but there's a mythology that we've created that I think is rich enough.
Can you talk about some of your horror influences and what you're doing?
Probably the biggest moment for me was when I was a kid. My mom took me to see Jurassic Park when I was 10 years old, which was probably the first time. I'd probably seen like Disney movies and like Aladdin and that kind of stuff before then, so going to the theater to see Jurassic Park, totally younger than I should have been, just scared me silly. Like I was crying and covering my eyes during like the T-Rex paddock scene, like just I was done. And then the really cool part is like I was covering my eyes, my mom was covering my eyes, like cursing the guy that recommended that she take me to the movie. And then the cool thing is, by the third act of the film, like when they've got over the fence and they feel like things are going to be fine, and I remember going like I'm still alive. Like I was so scared by the T-Rex, but I'm still here and this is actually awesome. You know what I mean? And then being like sad that there weren't any more dinosaurs. And then there was the Velociraptor scene in the kitchen, which I totally loved. So I kind of had that transition from like sheltered kids movies to kind of really realizing the power of it in that film. And it's one of my favorite films of all time. So there's a scene in this film that's a direct homage to the T-Rex paddock scene, except it's with a leprechaun. But they're stuck in a vehicle, at night with rain on the thing and flashlights. They don't know where it is, and so it kind of plays homage to one of my direct inspirations.
Very cool.
Yeah. What were you looking for in the cast?
I mean, you're always looking for people that come off in a way that are really relatable, but also can sell the terror, like sell being scared. And there was a scene, we shot a scene where one of the characters dies in a very shocking way, and like I called cut, and it took the actress, like I had to go over there and hold her hand, like she had to calm down for about a minute from where she got herself to, from the horror of what she just witnessed. And it's kind of amazing to see people put themselves through that and be able to go to those really dark places, but then have to come back. You know what I mean? Is you kind of forget what you're putting people through. And then there's other scenes, like there's one kind of iconic scene in the middle of the film, like, and it's a long kind of thing that I ended up shooting in these long takes and cutting it together. And so they ended up having to scream for almost like 10 minutes straight. And so like doing that for like an entire day was pretty amazing to put themselves through that. And like, it was cool to have actors that were totally trusting and willing to go as far as they could. And same with Hornswoggle, to basically make something that takes the idea as far as we could.
So yeah, you're talking about screaming and how brutal it was. Can you talk some more about the physicality and working with everyone and stunts?
Yeah, I mean, there's some huge stunts in the film, and Hornswoggle wanted to do all of them, and we had to be like, you have to shoot tomorrow. Like, I know you could do it, but we have people here that can do it too. And a lot of it was making sure just to get it's tough when you're doing a horror film to really get the prosthetic horror beats down really well, because they take a lot of time, but usually you don't have a lot of time. So it was a lot of the stunts went off well, but a lot of the time getting the gore right so that it looks, because if it doesn't look real, then you kind of lose the audience. So that was probably the hardest part, was spending. There's not a lot, even though I'm a visual effects, I come from a really strong visual effects background, and that's usually why I'm hired for things. In this case, we really wanted to go for something that was much more practically oriented. So getting those that gore right was kind of the biggest challenge.
What was the editing like? I know slasher films was always really tight edit.
Yeah, my style, I come like I said with Jurassic Park, like I come from a much more kind of Spielbergian style, like or that kind of setup and payoff that almost adventure films have. Like adventure films are one of my favorite genres, and it's definitely a build of suspense and then payoff of that, rather than just go, fast. I mean, there's definitely high energy sequences, but I don't have a cut every 15 frames. Like it's definitely, I pride myself in shooting films that are quite beautiful, and a lot of time you want to let those shots play. You got to cut some of them, but I think people will be surprised by I think the DP did an incredible job.
How about sound?
Yeah, the sound was really fun, because in horror films, sound is everything to getting the scares. But even they hired this guy who specializes just in creature voices and vocalizations, and he spent months just creating the sounds of the creature and how, because that's where all its personality comes from, right? How it's reacting when it's angry, when it's hungry. All that kind of stuff was really fun. It's interesting. I was thinking about it the other day. Like when you're making a film, you start with like everything in your mind of everything you want to do, and really the process of making a film is the narrowing of that. Like, okay, well, this is what we can actually put in the script, and okay, well, this is what we can actually shoot, and this is what we can actually get on the day. You're kind of always narrowing, and then you're editing, and you're continuing to throw out the best shots that you can't fit in, and then you get to the end of the edit, and then you put in music and sound, and it's like it's the first time that you're actually putting stuff in and like really bringing it to life, and like wow, like it's kind of, that's usually my favorite part of it, because it's actually, instead of taking stuff out, you're putting stuff in and making it even bigger and better, and it's often a very rewarding part of it. Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Sure.